All right, Farhan, you're with the Lions. But let's talk about Riders and Argonauts here. Like Dave Thomas dropped it on us earlier. I had no idea the Argos are this banged up. The Riders going in there, and no Kadeem Carey. It's a ratio thing, but it's a little bit shocking.
Yeah, I was surprised that Kadeem wasn't going to be a part of this one, just to get a chance to go back and play against Toronto. And I get the ratio thing with the other injuries that this team has, and Saskatchewan, when you think they're banged up and they lose somebody like, Kean Schaefer-Baker, and then you lose Sam Emelis, and that forces you to change your ratio, and you think, oh, they're in trouble. But then you look at Toronto roster and the number of changes there, it's amazing. And, talking to people in Toronto after week one, there really wasn't any level of panic. I think they realize this is a marathon, not a sprint. And they told me that, I remember the first week of the season, I think all the East teams that were playing a West team lost. So they just said to me that no one in the East is running away from anybody. If we go 0-3, we're just fine. We're not going to worry about it. So they want to make sure that when they get Chad Kelly back, they get him right. And when they get him right, they get a good team around him, right? And if that means that you take a little bit of time because you got a banged up offensive lineman or you got a banged up receiver, they not only want to get him back healthy, they want to get him back with the right people around him. So, when I look at this game, and those are big losses for Saskatchewan at receiver, there's no doubt. But at the end of it all, you still have Trevor Harris, and you still got a pretty good defense that's healthy. I'll take the Riders all day in this one.
And Thomas Bertrand-Houdon, like the last game he played, a little bit of a coming out party. You and I talked about it. We talked about it a number of times. So, having him in there, it's not like it's a bad thing for the Riders.
No, for sure. I mean, he's shown that he can play, right? And you want to make sure that you've got a rotation and the two of them can play. And, having two imports in that spot tends to be a bit of a luxury. But you're right, Houdon can play. I know that first week he got a little bit banged up, and fortunately he came out of it where he could continue to play. But, we're seeing Canadian running backs around the league. The game I've got here, Matthew Peterson is still going to be the starter for Winnipeg in that game. And it's pretty impressive that there's just more and more of these guys out there. And when given an opportunity, they find ways to perform.
It's interesting you talk about the opportunity, and I think that's really critical as you look at not only the Canadian running backs, but we're seeing Canadians playing more dominant positions all the time. Used to be it was offensive linemen. Get the big hoggies in there, fill your Canadian spots that way, maybe a safety. With Saskatchewan, we got a cornerback, we got a linebacker, we got a running back, we got them all over the place. What do you think has caused that development, Farhan? What do you think has brought that on for these guys?
I just think that players are being developed at a higher rate. Canadian players, you're finding guys choosing football, number one, and making efforts. You see guys at an earlier age that wind up making their way down to the U.S. so they can get developed down there with hopes of potentially earning a Division I scholarship. And not all of those guys, even when they play Division I, are going to wind up in the NFL. So you're getting guys there that are available at a higher level, right? But U Sports is doing more. You talk about U of S and U of R, getting better. And Guelph has 7 full-time coaches. UBC does a good job out here. The OUA is a really dynamic conference now with great rivalries and good committed programs. So I just think more and more the commitment level, whether you're a Canadian kid that chooses to go to the U.S. in high school and then plays in the U.S. or a guy that winds up staying in U Sports, and you might be more of a late bloomer, you're going to get good development options. So guys come into this league ready. Like, look at Matthew Peterson. That was his first game of professional football ever.
Wow.
He got drafted, goes back to university for a game, and then shows up, and Brady Oliveira gets injured, and he goes off for 130 yards on 23 carries. Like, it's crazy. So the guys can play. It's a good thing because we're losing more players, more Canadian players to the NFL. Mm-hmm. So I know people want to use that as an excuse to change the ratio, but the truth is the Canadian players that are still left to play in the CFL are better than they've ever been.
I agree with you 100%, and I agree with you about the youth sport development and that continued avenue for those players to get better and, like I say, more full-time coaches and more full-time commitments from those schools. As we go into this week,
you look at the Riders and what they've committed to the U of R to get that program at a high level. It's amazing. And then you go check out that facility in Saskatoon for the U of S. It's as good as anything in U Sports. It's outstanding. You can't not get better in those settings.
And even one of the coaches now with the Riders, young Josh Donnelly, was with the Rams, the U of R Rams last year. Mm-hmm. Now he's up with the Riders contributing. That, to me, that tells you as much about the coaching development as it does about the player development.
Yeah, and that was always a concern, when they started a spring league in the U.S., that there would be a level of brain drain. from Canadian coaching, and I don't think that's happened. And, even a guy like Jason Hogan in Winnipeg, right, who's getting his first chance to coordinate at the professional level, kind of coming up through those college ranks. And there's other guys around the country, like in Saskatchewan, you've got a young guy named Jordan Linnon, who's one of the assistant coaches on Corey Mace's staff, just a Canadian-born, bred, developed guy that's going to turn into a great coach in this league. And, what Corey Mace is doing as a Canadian coach. So, giving opportunities for those guys at that level is also a really good thing.
I want to switch topics a little bit. I want to take us off the CFL. You might have to change your background behind you there as we go. But Abbotsford Canucks up 2-1 in the Calder Cup Championship. I looked through their roster. I didn't recognize a lot of Vancouver Canucks being sent down to participate. So it's a good thing that there's a great team behind them that's going to come in and fill some holes there.
Truly, I think you're saying that because you probably didn't pay a lot of attention to the Canucks because they were so damn bad this year. So I don't blame you. But a lot of these guys actually have had significant cups of coffee with the Canucks all season. Whether it was a guy like Max Sasson or Linus Karlsson or, Arshdeep Bains had a couple of runs up here. So, and the only one they didn't paper down early enough in the process was Elias Pettersson, the defenseman, who could have been a part of this run as well. But they're doing well without him. And even a guy like Jonathan Lekromaki, who was a high pick from the Canucks a couple years ago, can't get into the lineup right now. And he spent most of the year in Vancouver. So it's good that as bad as the big club has been, some of these guys are getting developed, right? Like the development process with Vancouver is good. And it's critical because they don't draft much, right? High in the draft. They trade all their picks. So when you do that, you've got to find a way to extract value from guys that you get in the building. And, the town in Abbotsford is totally bought into it right now. I mean, attendance was up and down during the season, but they're all in on this playoff run, and it's pretty cool to watch. And Manny Malhotra as well has done a fabulous job.
Yeah.
Because there was a time when they had so many guys in Vancouver because of injuries, and in the midst of that, they go on a 13-game win streak during the season. So for him to do what he's done, I mean, this Charlotte team, they swept their previous two series coming into this, and here's Abbotsford up 2-1 in the Calder Cup final.
Farhan Lalji joining us for the Cooperators here on the Sports Cage. All right, it was our poll question on sportscage.com today. I'll ask you, Connor McDavid, does he win a Stanley Cup? And does he win a Stanley Cup with the Oilers, or does he win a Stanley Cup with somebody else?
I think Connor McDavid's going to win a Stanley Cup. Is it going to be with the Oilers? It's hard to say. So I'm curious to see what happens in this contract. Everybody believes he's going to re-sign with Edmonton, but does it turn into a Austin Matthews 4-year deal, right? Where he can just say, look, I'm committed, but I still want to have a little bit of time at the end of my career if it doesn't go the way I want, right? So I can see that happening, but for all the flaws on the Oiler roster, and truthfully, I think they were better this year than they were last, especially on the back end. I don't know how they got to the final last year with that blue line, but I think they were collectively better, even with Ekholm not being the same guy with the injury. I think it was a better roster this year, a deeper roster this year, but they still are a ways to go to beat Florida. But for me, anytime you have McDavid and Draisaitl, you're going to be in the conversation. Might Edmonton take a step back a year from now? Step back might be 2 playoff rounds, right? But eventually they're just going to constantly be knocking on the door with those 2 players. And, look, I'm not an Edmonton guy. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. And I'm glad they lost so that we can talk about the CFL in that market more because we needed it, right? But I want to see McDavid win a cup. I don't want him to be that guy that's the best player never to win. So one day he's going to win one.
Yeah, okay. Back to the CFL to end it off. What game intrigues you this week?
Wow, throw them at me. Give me a reason. I know I picked a bunch of the road teams
Winnipeg,
to win.
BC? No? Montreal, Edmonton. I'm curious about Montreal, Edmonton.
Yeah.
No?
Little
Edmonton's Fajardo cleanup work?
I got asked about this the other day from an Edmonton station about what was going on in Calgary. And I feel that Calgary is taking advantage of a really soft schedule right now, right? When you get to play Toronto with Nick Arbuckle and they got to play Hamilton at home in week 1, whereas Edmonton's got a real tough schedule and playing Montreal and Saskatchewan in the next 2 weeks. That's going to be tough. I can't see them winning either of those 2 games. So, never say never, but I think Montreal's winning that one.
So you think Ottawa, Calgary?
That one interests me. Now, again, Drew Brown's not expected to play. It's probably going to be Dustin Crum in that game. So they haven't seen a mobile quarterback yet. So what does Crum do to them with Bobby Slowik's defense? And now you lose Reggie Bagleton. That's a tough one, right? They're not deep enough, I think, to withstand that. But, it just depends on what Crum can do offensively. It's had all the first-team reps this week, but, that's a team that's kind of built behind Drew Brown. They're not necessarily built to have, a quarterback taking off with a lot of designed run. Curious to see if he just takes off organically like Trey Ford does and makes things happen, because that can be a bit of a neutralizer if he gets going. So that would interest me. For BC, I like Masoli a lot, but Zach Caleros coming back and Nathan Rourke not playing, it only gets harder for the Lions, I think.
Well, no, I don't. This Calgary 3-0. Like now, if Calgary goes 3-0, like if
they can, absolutely.
Which would be a surprise to everybody.
What did they get? 13,000?
Yeah.
Then if they're 3-0, if they're a 3-0 team.
Shots fired.
I like the Montreal Edmonton game. I think that's the one that interests me. The young Montreal quarterback, seeing him continue to develop. That's what I like watching. And Edmonton, I still think has got some issues going on there. And I'm agreeing. Fajardo's going to be in there quickly. I
want to know this last thing from you is, are you hearing it? And because a lot of people are talking about how many yards the Riders are giving up. Josh Bell, coach on earlier, kind of basically saying, don't worry about it. We're good. Anything that you're hearing, or are you looking at the Riders and how much they're giving up and worrying about that? That's kind of like the old Patriots. The Patriots used to give up tons of yards, but they just won.
Yeah, well, it's not about the yards you give up. It's about the points you give up, right? And it's how do you function in the red zone? Like, to me, there's two things to look at. How does a team play in the red zone, and how does a team play on second and long? Not just second down, but second and long specifically, right? You, like, in those situations, you need to get off the field, and Saskatchewan's doing that, right? And then in terms of how their defense plays in the red zone, they're forcing teams to kick field goals. They're not giving up a lot of touchdowns. So, Corey Masel will have them right when it matters most, as long as they stay healthy, and they've managed to on the defensive side of the ball.
All right, have a good week. We'll watch this one. We'll see if Edmonton, Montreal maybe looks to be the most intriguing matchup of the weekend, but regardless.
And I know you guys are close to Fajardo, guys, just because you had him there for a couple of years, but I don't sense that there's a quick hook coming on Trey Ford.
No, I want it because I predicted it. I just don't want to look like an absolute buffoon again. So,
again.
Yeah, hey, I said
you may get your wish. I don't think it's this week, though.
Okay, thanks, Farhan. Have a good one.
See you guys. Have a great weekend.
Take care.
From TSN.